It started on a rainy evening, the kind where thunder sounds like a whisper and memories feel louder than words. I was in the kitchen, stirring tea I didn't really want, staring out the window at a storm that felt strangely familiar. That's when I heard the knock, hesitant, almost apologetic. When I opened the door, there he was, my husband's son, drenched, eyes full of questions I wasn't sure I could answer. We hadn't seen each other in years. Our connection had always been defined by silence. He was polite but distant, as if affection would somehow betray someone else's memory. His mother had passed when he was young, and though I never tried to replace her, I always wished he'd let me care, even just a little. "Can I come in?" he asked softly, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be, fragile, searching, hiding hurt behind quiet eyes. I nodded, stepping aside, letting the smell of rain follow him in. He sat down, his hands clasped tight, a man who looked like he'd seen too much of the world too soon. "Dad doesn't know I'm here," he said, glancing up at me. His voice trembled slightly. I just didn't know where else to go. Something inside me melted. Whatever tension existed between us vanished in that instant. I handed him the cup of tea, and as our fingers brushed, I realized how much he'd changed, not just older, but heavier somehow, as if life had carved its lessons into him. For a while, we just sat there. The thunder rolled. The clock ticked. And then he started talking about the choices he'd made, the mistakes, the things he couldn't tell his father. A bad investment, a broken relationship, a sense of failure that followed him like a shadow. He said he was ashamed. I could hear the pain behind every word. "You don't have to carry it alone," I told him. "You're not the sum of your mistakes." He looked at me, really looked, as if hearing that for the first time. His eyes softened, and for the first time since he walked in, he smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. We talked for hours. He told me about the nights he couldn't sleep, the guilt that wouldn't let go, the loneliness that kept him running from everyone who loved him. And I listened quietly, without judgment. Because sometimes helping doesn't mean fixing, it just means being there when someone finally stops pretending they're fine. At one point, he said, "You've always been different. You never asked me to call you Mom." I laughed gently. "I never needed to. I just wanted you to know I cared." He nodded, staring at the table. I think I knew. I just didn't know how to accept it. When I reached out and placed my hand over his, it wasn't maternal or romantic, it was human. It was compassion. But still, there was something powerful in the moment, a quiet electricity that made the air feel charged. Not in a forbidden way, but in a way that reminded me how fragile hearts can be when they finally let their walls down. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle, the kind of calm that comes after a storm. He looked up, his voice barely a whisper. "Do you think he'll forgive me?" "Your father?" I asked. He nodded. "Yes," I said. "But first, you have to forgive yourself." He smiled again, that same half-broken smile, and for a brief moment, the distance between us vanished. I saw him not as my husband's son, not as the boy who never called me family, but as a soul trying to find peace. And maybe that's what love really is, not titles or bloodlines, but the quiet act of standing beside someone in their hardest hour. Later, when my husband came home, the three of us sat together in the same room for the first time in years. There was awkwardness at first, yes, but also something healing beneath it. My husband looked between us, sensing that something had shifted, though he didn't ask what. Some stories don't need to be told, they can be felt. That night, after they both went to sleep, I stood by the window again, watching the last drops of rain slide down the glass. The storm had passed, but the air was still alive with change. I realized then that helping someone isn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes, it's about listening when no one else will. Sometimes it's about being the place they come back to when the world turns cold. In the days that followed, my husband's son started visiting more often. Not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. He'd bring small gifts, a book he thought I'd like, a plant for the kitchen window. And every time, his smile came easier. One evening, as he was leaving, he turned at the door and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled back. "Thank you for letting me help." When the door closed behind him, I realized something else, Helping him had healed something in me too, the quiet ache of wanting to belong, the years of unspoken distance. Life has a strange way of giving back when you least expect it. Maybe that's the real story, not of rescue, but of redemption. Of two people who found understanding in the unlikeliest place. I didn't just help my husband's son that night. In a way, he helped me too. To remember that love, in its purest form, doesn't need names or permission. It just needs courage to show up, even when the world is raining outside.